There is a quiet moment in the very first episode of Avatar, The Last Airbender, where a boy floats up out of a block of ice with his eyes glowing, and the show treats it like a rescue, when really it is the moment a child wakes up alone after watching his entire world end. We just accept it. We move on, we meet the characters, we get the jokes, and the maps, and the bending demonstrations, and only later, on a rewatch, do you start to feel how dark the show actually is underneath all that warmth. Tonight we are going slowly through every major character in Avatar, The Last Airbender, and pulling on the darkest, quietest thread. The writing leaves dangling for each one. So get comfortable, dim the lights, and if you have not yet subscribed to Ember, it really does help us keep making these. We start with Aang because every other dark theory in the show rests on the foundations of his. We meet him the way you meet someone in a dream. Blue light, a sphere of ice, eyes glowing, and a small boy floating up into the arms of two strangers from the Southern Water Tribe. The show presents this as a rescue, and it is a rescue. But the more time you spend with him, the more you realize that the boy you meet in that first episode is in shock. He does not know it yet. He thinks he has only been asleep for a few hours, or maybe a few days. He still believes he can fly home to the Southern Air Temple and find Monk Gyatso waiting with a fresh pot of moon peach pie. And the darkest thread that hangs over Aang, the one the show is too gentle to ever name in plain language, is that the bright, playful, joke-cracking boy you spend 3 books with is not really an emotionally healthy child. He is a survivor performing okayness for the people who pulled him out of the ice. The canon is plain. Aang ran. Before the comet, before the war began in earnest, the monks told him he was the Avatar, and they planned to separate him from Gyatso because they thought attachment was slowing his training. He overheard, he panicked, he climbed onto Appa, and he flew into the storm that froze him in the iceberg for 100 years. While he was frozen, Fire Lord Sozin used the power of his comet to commit a genocide. Every other airbender in the world, the 4 temples, the men, the women, the children, the elders, all of them gone. Aang wakes up as the only living member of an entire culture. The show tells you this. It is not subtext, it is text. What the show does not say out loud, what it leaves you to feel rather than hear, is that this fact more or less ought to break him. And it nearly does. There is a scene at the Southern Air Temple very early on where he finds Gyatso's skeleton sitting in a meditation chamber surrounded by the helmets of the firebenders Gyatso killed before he himself died. Aang sees it. His eyes catch on the bones, on the realization of what happened in the place he used to call home. And then his eyes glow, and he is no longer in his body. He goes into the Avatar state. The light of every past life shoots into the sky like a beacon, and he tears the temple apart. Katara has to talk him down, and when she does, when he comes back, he just moves on. He keeps moving for almost the entire show. Read carefully, and the cheerfulness starts to look like a defense. The pranks, the rides on the giant koi fish, the dancing, the appetite for fun, are not the surface of a happy child. They are the surface of a child who knows that if he stops moving, if he lets himself sit in a quiet room for more than a few minutes, the grief will come up the back of his throat like a wave and he will not be able to function. Look at what happens when he is forced to stop. In the swamp, in the desert after Appa is taken, in the cave at the end of Book 2 where he is asked to fully open his last chakra, he does not handle stillness well. The desert episode in particular shows you a different Aang, hollow-eyed, exhausted, snapping at his friends, behaving in a way none of us would have predicted from the first episode. That is the Aang that has always been underneath. The other Aang, the bright one, is the version he chose because he needed to. There is a quieter reading still, and it is the one that haunts a lot of longtime viewers. It is the reading of his refusal to kill Ozai. In the finale, the writers put him in a corner. Every spiritual mentor he speaks to, every past avatar tells him that the situation requires a final act of violence. Roku, who let Sozin live and watched him start the war, tells him to be decisive. Kyoshi, who declared that she would have done what was necessary without hesitation, tells him essentially the same thing. Kuruk and Yangchen, in their own ways, both push him toward ending Ozai. Aang refuses. He finds the lion turtle. He learns energy bending. He spares Ozai by stripping him of his bending rather than his life. The official reading of this is Moral Triumph, the boy who refuses to break his vow as the last living member of a pacifist people. And that reading is real, and it is meant. But there is a darker reading layered underneath, and it is that Aang spares Ozai in part because Aang is a 12-year-old child who simply cannot kill a man and live with himself afterwards. The lion turtle is, on this reading, a way out the universe provides, because the protagonist is too young to carry what the role demands. None of this is stated in the show. It is a reading the show invites. The gentle child you fall in love with is, underneath, the loneliest character in the series, and the smile is the wound. Katara is harder to read darkly because the show puts so much of her pain right on the surface. Her mother is killed in the very first scene she ever shares with you in flashback. She is the last waterbender of the Southern Water Tribe. She is the parental figure of the group, the cook, the medic, the conscience. And the line the show plants for her very carefully, very gradually across 2 books is that the distance between Katara and the woman who becomes her dark mirror is thinner than she ever admits out loud. The woman is Hama. We meet her in Book 3 in an episode called The Puppet Master, and the structure of that episode is one of the cleanest, most pointed pieces of writing in the whole show. Hama is an elderly waterbender from the Southern Water Tribe, the same tribe as Katara. She was taken from her home decades earlier by Fire Nation raiders, exactly the same kind of raid that killed Katara's mother. She was imprisoned. She invented bloodbending in her cell as a way to escape, by manipulating the water inside her guards' bodies during the full moon. By the time Katara meets her, Hama is using bloodbending to take revenge on civilians who happen to live in the Fire Nation village where she ended up settling, kidnapping them and trapping them in caves. She teaches Katara her technique against Katara's will, by forcing her to use it on Sokka and Aang to save them. The show could have left Hama as a 1-episode antagonist, a cautionary tale, a horror story. Instead, the show comes back to bloodbending. In The Southern Raiders, very near the end of Book 3, Katara tracks down the man who led the raid that killed her mother. On the way to him, she catches up to the new captain of the Southern Raiders ship and bloodbends him on a stormy night, with no full moon overhead, exerting a power and a control that even Hama did not seem to have. She lifts him off the ground, she holds him in the air, she controls his body, and you watch the woman she could become flicker across her face. When she finally stands in front of Yanra himself, the actual killer, she does not bloodbend him. She does not kill him, she walks away. The official reading of this, the one Aang and Zuko more or less articulate inside the episode, is that Katara chose mercy. She did not forgive. She did not pretend the man was anything other than what he was. But she did not become Hama. And that reading is the right reading, the intended one. The second layer, the one the writers leave hanging just underneath, is that Katara is one bad night, one harder loss, one slightly less patient companion away from being Hama. The skills she would need are the same. The grief she would need is the same. The justification she would need is, almost word for word, the justification Hama gives her. Both of them are Southern Water Tribe women orphaned by Fire Nation raiders. Both of them carry that loss for the rest of their lives. The only thing that separates them is who happened to be standing beside Katara at the moment she could have crossed the line. Aang was there. Zuko was there. Sokka was there. Hama did not have any of that. The show is too kind to point at this directly. But the symmetry is the entire reason the Puppet Master and the Southern Raiders are placed where they are placed in the timeline, 2 episodes that talk to each other across the gap of half a book. There's a further reading that floats around the fandom and that the show itself never confirms. It is that Katara, having learned the technique, never really unlearns it. In Legend of Korra, which takes place decades later and is a separate canon worth flagging here, bloodbending is outlawed, and there are characters who use it underground, including a villain who can do it without the full moon, the way Katara managed to do it in the Southern Raiders. Some longtime viewers have read this as the show quietly suggesting that what Katara learned, she carried with her, even after she put it down. There is no scene that confirms she ever uses bloodbending again. There is no canon line that says she does. But the technique is in her hands, she knows how it feels, and so the second darkness around Katara, faintly visible behind her warmth and her healing and her domestic kindness, is that the most powerful waterbender of her generation walked around for the rest of her long life knowing exactly what she could do to another human being if she decided to. The show lets that fact sit in the background and asks you to do the math yourself. The other thread for Katara is gentler but no less heavy. She is the one of the 4 central children who became, very quickly, the mother of the group. She is 14 years old. She cooks, she cleans, she patches wounds, she breaks up fights, She is the emotional center. The show has Toph point at this in the desert episode, and again, more directly, in Book 3, Katara takes on Kaya's role because the role is empty. The quietly sad reading is that her capacity to love this much, this fast, this protectively, is in part a response to losing her mother at the age she lost her. She rebuilt the role around herself because there was no one else to fill it. The show does not score this with sad music, it just lets you watch a child raise 3 other children for 3 books, and lets you make of that what you will. Sokka tends to get treated lightly by the show, but his thread is one of the saddest in the series once you sit with it. Sokka is the only one of the Central Four who cannot bend. He is in a world where benders are the sun around which power, status, education, lineage, and survival orbit, and he is a regular kid with a boomerang. His sister bends, his enemies bend, his friends bend, his teachers bend. Almost every battle that matters is decided by people manipulating an element, and he is standing inside that battle with a stone club and a piece of curved wood. The official reading of Sokka is that he learns to thrive there, that he becomes a tactician, an inventor, a swordsman, a planner, the brain that holds the group together. And that reading is true, and the writers mean it. But underneath, there is a darker thread, and the show plants it in his very first major moment. In the first episode, when his father has left to fight the war, Sokka is left in charge of the southern water tribe village. He is 15 years old. He is parading around with the smallest children, drilling them in a way that is half play and half real responsibility, and the show frames it as comedy. He has nobody to learn from. He is performing the masculinity of his father because his father's not there. The deeper reading is that almost every choice Sokka makes for the rest of the show is downstream of his father leaving. He becomes a tactician because nobody will hand him a power he can be born into. He becomes obsessed with strategy because strategy is the only place where intellect alone can carry a body that cannot summon fire. He befriends Suki because she belts him with a fan and proves that he has been performing a role he was given. He chases the title of warrior because the title has to be earned in a world where benders are simply called masters. The episode that puts a fine point on this is the one in Book 3 where he visits the swordmaster Piandao. Sokka apprentices, lies about his lineage, makes a sword from a meteorite, and is told at the end that Piandao knew he was lying the whole time and was teaching him anyway. The episode plays as joyful. It is, in many ways. But the structural detail is that Sokka has had to find his own master in secret far from home, and pay for the lessons by labor in order to claim a discipline that his sister was always going to find naturally. His silent ache is the ache of being the only non-bender in a story written about benders. He fights through it. He laughs through it. He never collapses under it. But the show lets you see how heavy it is by giving him exactly one true moment of unguarded pride when he holds the meteorite sword for the first time, and then by ripping that sword away from him in the day of Black Sun invasion, where it is left behind on a battlefield he cannot return to. There is also Yue. There is no honest treatment of Sokka's darkness that skips Yue. He meets her at the North Pole, falls in love with her in the span of a few days, and loses her in the Book 1 finale when she sacrifices her life to become the new moon spirit. He watches the girl he loves dissolve into a glow that rises into the sky and becomes a celestial body he will see every night for the rest of his life. The show does not dwell on this, it moves on. It gives him Suki later, which is good and real, and the writers clearly believe in their relationship. But the darker reading is that Sokka, like Aang, like Katara, learns to keep moving because stopping is too expensive. The girl is in the sky. The father is at the war. The mother is gone. The technique he most needs in the world has been given to everybody else. He cracks a joke. He picks up his boomerang. He keeps going. What you actually have in the comic relief of the show is a portrait of a child holding 3 losses by their corners and refusing to set any of them down. Toph is harder to read darkly because she enters the show as one of its most aggressively self-assured characters. She fights Aang and Katara to a standstill the first time they meet her. She invents metal bending, she mocks her own parents to their faces, and walks out of her own house at 12 years old. The official reading of Toph is that she is the freest character in the series. She has more agency, more confidence, more raw skill, more sheer, joyful, destructive power than almost anyone else in the cast. And that reading is meant. But the version of her life that confidence is keeping at bay is the version her parents tried to put her in. And the swagger is a kind of armor she chose because the alternative was a cage. The canon is sharp. Toph was born blind to one of the wealthiest families in the Earth Kingdom. Her parents believed her blindness made her fragile. They hid her in their estate, they hid her from the public, they refused to allow her to bend in any visible way. They treated her, on screen in the episode The Blind Bandit, as a precious, decorative object. She is 12, and she's being raised to be a doll. Her response to this is to invent her own life by night. She learns earthbending from the badger moles, the original earthbenders, by feeling vibrations through the ground because she cannot see. She becomes the champion of an underground earthbending tournament under a stage name. She invents her own style by necessity because the style taught to most earthbenders is built for sighted students. She steals her own life from her parents at 12 years old and goes on the road with Aang because Aang asks her to. What the swagger covers is a real and lasting wound, and the wound is that original cage. Watch her with her parents in The Blind Bandit, and you can see the shape of it. She loves them. The show is not interested in pretending she does not, but she cannot live inside their idea of her. The aggressive humor, the punching, the nicknames, the refusal to let any sentimentality land, the readiness to mock weakness in herself before anyone else can mock it for her, the refusal to be controlled, those are the behaviors of someone who has had to fight hard for a version of herself the people who raised her would not allow. The other thread for Toph is more speculative, and it touches the Legend of Korra portion of the canon, which I want to flag as separate. In Korra, an old Toph appears living alone in a swamp, withdrawn from the world. Her two daughters, Lin and Suyin, have different fathers, neither of whom Toph talks about, and both daughters have, at different times in the spin-off, an estranged relationship with their mother. The implication left for viewers of Korra is that Toph, the freest character of her generation, did not become a present mother in the long run. The reading the fandom has carried is that Toph's defiance, her refusal to be controlled, her cultivated solitude, were never things she fully outgrew, and that what made her the strongest earthbender of her age also made her a difficult parent. There is no canon line in Avatar, The Last Airbender, that confirms this. It is a reading that lives in the gap between her childhood as the show portrays it and her old age as Korra portrays it. But if you take that arc as a unit, the same thing that saved her from her parents kept her from her children. The show leaves you to feel that without telling you. Zuko is the character around whom the largest number of darknesses cluster, partly because he is the one whose internal life the show most actively dramatizes, and partly because the show is generous enough to let you read his story in 3 or 4 different ways at once. The canon shape of him is famous. He is the firstborn son of Fire Lord Ozai. He has a sister, Azula, who is 2 years younger and a prodigy. As a 13-year-old, he speaks out of turn in a war council. He is challenged to an Agni Kai. He believes he is going to duel the general who proposed sacrificing Fire Nation soldiers, and instead he is forced to duel his father. He refuses to fight. His father burns half his face, banishes him, and gives him an impossible quest. He has to find and capture the Avatar, who has been missing for 100 years, in order to restore his honor. He spends 3 books slowly unlearning that mission. He joins the protagonists. He helps end the war. The cleanest reading of Zuko's situation is that the quest itself was designed never to be completable. Ozai sends Zuko off into the world to find a person who has not been seen alive in a century. This is not a punishment for bad behavior. It is exile dressed as a mission. Ozai does not believe he will ever see Zuko again. He does not have to do anything else to be rid of his eldest son. He just has to set a condition that the world cannot meet. The brilliance of the show is that the Avatar then reappears, the impossible condition becomes met, and Zuko spends his teenage years chasing something he was never meant to catch. Watched the whole time by an uncle who can see exactly what his brother is doing to his nephew. The next layer is the scar itself. The official story, the one Zuko tells himself for most of the show, is that the scar was a punishment, that he had been disrespectful, that this was a fair price. The show very slowly dismantles this for him. By the end of Book 3, when he confronts his father, the scar is no longer a mark of his own failure. It is a record of what his father did to him for refusing to participate in cruelty. The reading the show leaves on the table is that the scar was not, in fact, only about that moment in the War Council. It was the moment Ozai had been waiting for. There is a reading you encounter often in long viewer essays that suggests Ozai had decided long before that he wanted his daughter as his heir, and that he was waiting for any reason to make the elder son disposable. The show is more ambiguous than that, but it gives you enough to make the case. Ozai does not hesitate. He does not soften it. He does not ration it. He puts his hand on his son's face, and he leaves him with that mark for the rest of his life. The third thread for Zuko is the slower one, and it is the one that most viewers do not pick up on until the second or third rewatch. It is the question of his real lineage. There is a story Azula tells him in the back half of Book 3 around the death of Azulan, that their mother Ursa did something terrible to save Zuko's life. The strong implication, confirmed gradually in subsequent canon, is that Azulan, the previous Fire Lord, ordered Ozai to kill Zuko as a punishment for Ozai requesting to be made heir over his elder brother Iroh. Ursa intervened. She agreed to commit a crime, the assassination of Azulan, in exchange for her son's life and her own banishment. This is canon by the end of the show. It is referenced by Ozai himself. It is the structural reason Ozai is on the throne. The darker layer on top of this comes from the comics, specifically the Search and Smoke and Shadow arcs, and I want to flag clearly that these are comic canon and not series canon. In those comics, the story suggests that Ursa was secretly in love with another man, a man she had been engaged to before being forced into the royal marriage, and that Zuko may not be Ozai's biological son. The comics treat this as ambiguous. They do not confirm it outright, but they raise the question, and they raise it in a way that recolors the whole of Zuko's story. If you accept the theory, then the reason Zuko cannot please his father, cannot match his sister, cannot inherit firebending the way Azula does, cannot win Ozai's approval no matter what he tries, is partly that Ozai has always suspected he is not really his son. The brutality of the Agni Kai is, on this reading, not only about discipline, it is about a quiet rage Ozai has been carrying for years. The fandom has run with this in many directions, some persuasive, some absurd. The show itself in Avatar, The Last Airbender, never confirms it. Even the comics keep one foot on each side of the line. But the reading is there, and it is worth naming, because it is the one that turns Zuko's banishment from a single act of cruelty into a long arc of inherited suspicion. The last thread for Zuko, the one that is probably the most quietly devastating, is that the show makes a point of giving him almost no real resolution with Azula. They fight at the end. He wins, but only because Azula has already broken down. He becomes Fire Lord. As far as the comic continuity has explored it, he visits her in confinement, and the writers leave the question of whether she can ever recover deliberately open. So Zuko's victory has a hole in it. He has won the throne, restored his nation's reputation, married Mai, found his mother, but he ends the show still tied at the wrist to a sister who never got the help he found. The brother and sister story does not end at Sozin's comet. It just pauses there. The show invites you to imagine the rest of it, and the rest of it is not happy. Iroh is the character the show treats most gently, and the character whose dark layer most rewards a careful viewer. Iroh appears as a warm, jovial, tea-drinking uncle, the man you would want narrating your nightmares back to you. He sings, he plays paisho, he gives lessons in patience, he eats dumplings, he tucks Zuko in at night. He is the moral center of the show. And the man you meet in Book 1 is a man who has rebuilt himself out of the wreckage of who he used to be, and who carries that wreckage with him in every scene without ever quite naming it. The canon facts are sharp. Iroh was the heir to the Fire Nation throne. He led a years-long siege against the Earth Kingdom capital of Ba Sing Se. He was nicknamed the Dragon of the West because he had killed, by his own report, a dragon, an animal already approaching extinction in his time because of Fire Nation hunting expeditions. He was the senior general of an invading army during a colonial war. He was, in plain language, a war criminal of the most efficient kind. His siege of Ba Sing Se was so close to succeeding that he had broken through the outer wall, the wall that had stood for centuries. He was then on the verge of the largest single conquest of his nation's century-long war. What stopped him was his son. Lu Ten died at Ba Sing Se. The show tells you this through a single image, a candlelit memorial on the anniversary of Lu Ten's death, in the Book 2 episode Tales of Ba Sing Se. There is a wordless segment in that episode set to a song called Leaves from the Vine, where Iroh sets up an offering for his dead son under a tree in the city he once tried to destroy. The story behind that segment is part of the show's history. The voice actor for Iroh, Mako Iwamatsu, died during production, and the segment was dedicated to him. The episode aired as a tribute. The reason all of that is worth saying out loud is that the segment also tells you something the show otherwise lets you guess. Iroh did not give up the war because he had a philosophical conversion. He gave up the war because his only son died inside the very gate he had been trying to break open, and he could not bear to keep doing what he had been doing. The deeper reading, the one many long viewers settle on after a rewatch, is that Iroh's entire late life is an act of atonement, and that his attachment to Zuko is a part of that atonement. He failed his son. He failed him by being a general before he was a father, by raising him for war, by letting him die at the wall of a city his father was assaulting. Zuko becomes, in this reading, a second chance. Iroh does for Zuko, slowly, patiently, for years on a small ship, in a small apartment in Ba Sing Se, in a prison cell under the city, what he did not get the chance to do for Lu Ten. He stays, he listens, he waits. There is a still darker layer the show flirts with around the dragon. In the Book 2 episode, The Firebending Masters, Zuko and Aang travel to the Sun Warrior ruins and meet the last two dragons in existence, Ran and Sha. They learn that firebending originated with dragons. They learn that the surviving dragons were hidden because hunters were killing them for sport and status. And it is mentioned that Iroh had once claimed to be the man who killed the last dragon. The reveal is that he made that claim in order to protect the real surviving dragons, by ending the hunt with a false trophy. There are two interpretations you can run side by side from this. The official one, that he protected them, is the one the writers underline. But there is also the question of why Iroh, a senior general of a hunting culture, would have been close enough to the dragons in the first place to claim the kill. The unhappy answer is that he probably had hunted them. He saw what was happening to them. And his lie may have been an act of late conscience rather than a clean rescue. The show does not commit to this. It lets the original story stand. But the structure invites the second reading, and a lot of viewers leave with the sense that Iroh has done much more harm than the show ever asks him to account for. The wise old man drinking tea behind the counter of a Ba Sing Se tea shop has worse memories than any other character in the cast, and the calm you love him for is built directly on top of them. Azula is the character around whom the most carefully constructed darkness in the show is built, and the show signals as much by the way it ends her story. Azula begins as a glittering antagonist. She is 14 at the start of Book 2, a prodigy who throws blue fire, a master strategist, a child who has been trained to please her father by being whatever he requires. She conquers Ba Sing Se in the Book 2 finale by walking into the throne room and turning the secret police on themselves. She kills Aang in that same episode, or appears to. She is, for almost 2 seasons, the most dangerous character in the show. And then, in the back half of Book 3, the show takes her apart, very deliberately, in front of you. The official reading of Azula is that she is the showcase of what Ozai's parenting does to a child who succeeds at it. Zuko fails at being Ozai's son, and the failure forces him into the world, where he eventually finds himself. Azula succeeds, and the success destroys her. The version of the theory that goes one step further is more specific. It is that Azula has been mentally ill her entire life, that the show plants the symptoms early, and that the breakdown at the end is not an event but a delayed reveal. Watch her closely on a rewatch. She controls others through fear. She tests her friends with veiled cruelty. She struggles to read affection except as weakness. She uses her bending under stress not as art but as discharge. And there is a moment in the episode The Beach where the show drops the mask for 30 or so seconds and lets her say something openly. She tries to flirt with a boy at a party. She fails. She talks with the people closest to her about her mother. She says that her mother thought she was a monster. She is the only character in that whole episode who's being completely honest. And what she's being honest about is something deeply, deeply broken. What the show plants on top of this is one specific belief Ozai has cultivated in her. He has told her, in word and in deed, that she is the favored child, the worthy one, the one who will inherit. He has used her against Zuko as a tool. He has trained her to perform brilliance so that he can use the performance as a weapon against her brother. And he has not, in 3 books of Showtime, expressed a single moment of warmth toward her that is not in the form of approval for an act of cruelty. Azula is told she is loved. She does not, on any honest reading of the show, ever receive that love in a form a child can absorb. Ozai keeps her near him because she is useful. The instant she stops being useful, in the second half of Book 3, when he is preparing for the comet, he sends her away. He makes her Fire Lord as a kind of dismissal. He is going to burn the world with Sozin's comet. and he leaves her on the throne of a country he no longer particularly cares about. She figures this out on screen in a single look. The breakdown begins there. By the time Zuko and Katara fight her in the courtyard during the Agni Kai at the end of the show, Azula is already gone. She is hallucinating. She is hearing voices. She is cutting her own hair. She is firing at shadows. The fight is not a fight between two princes for a throne. It is a sister coming apart on national television while her brother tries to land enough hits to stop her from killing anyone, including herself. Katara wins the fight by chaining her up. Azula screams and weeps in the chains. The show ends on that scream, and it does not score it triumphantly. It scores it as the worst kind of grief. What all of that adds up to is that her father broke her on purpose, and that he broke her by raising her to be useful and never to be loved. There is a fan theory, supported by close readings of certain scenes, that suggests Azula's father did not even teach her to firebend out of pride in her talent, but as a tool of control. The comics, which I am flagging as separate canon, continue her story in a direction that is left deliberately ambiguous. She escapes from her institution, she wanders the country, she is sometimes a partner of Zuko's, sometimes an antagonist, sometimes a presence that cannot be classified. The show in the series proper closes on the chains. What it leaves you to feel is that even if she escapes the chains, she will never escape what was put inside her head, because what was put inside her head was put there by the only parent she ever had. Ozai is the character the show works hardest to keep at a distance, and his darkness is the one that completes the family. The official reading of Ozai is that he is the simplest villain of the show. He is the unambiguous obstacle, the one whose defeat is the goal. The show holds his face out of the frame for almost 2 full books. You hear him through walls, you see him in flashback, you see his back, you see his throne. You do not see his face clearly until very late in Book 2, when he is finally framed and lit as a person. This is a deliberate choice. The writers know what they are doing. The distance is itself the point. Ozai is not a person in his own household. He is a presence. He is a hand on your face. He is the voice from the dais. The deeper reading is that he was made the way he was by his own father. Azula, the previous Fire Lord, was a long-lived, cold, severe man who took his position and his nation's war seriously, and who showed plain favoritism to his eldest son, Iroh. Ozai, the second son, watched his older brother be groomed for the throne, watched him lead the army, watched him father a son who would have been heir after him. When Lu Ten died and Iroh broke, Ozai saw his opening. He asked his father to be made heir over Iroh. Azulan's response was to order him to kill Zuko, his own son, as punishment for that arrogance in order to teach him the cost of what he had asked for. Ozai was prepared, on the strong implication of the show, to do it. Ursa stopped him. The next morning, Azula was dead, Ozai was Fire Lord. Sitting on top of those facts is the recognition that the man who burned his son's face had been raised by a man who would have ordered the same thing, and that the cruelty was not invented in him but passed to him. This is not a defense of Ozai, the show does not offer one, but it does suggest that the line of Fire Lords from Sozin onward has been a family in which fathers do not love sons, sons do not trust fathers, and the throne is inherited through whatever cruelty is necessary to seize it. Ozai is the worst case of a long pattern. The deeper, even darker reading is that without the lion turtle and Aang's specific moral resistance, the throne would simply have passed to him by way of his own daughter, and that Azula's breakdown is the last possible accident saving the entire system from continuing. Ozai is the result. Azula was supposed to be the next iteration. The show ends the line by stripping Ozai of his bending and locking him underground. He spends the rest of his life in the comics that follow in a cell. His face is the last thing Aang ever leaves untouched in the canon you're watching, and the show stages that mercy as the breaking of the chain, the one Aang would not himself extend. Azula is barely on screen, and what lingers around him is largely a theory about absence. He is the Fire Lord between Sozin and Ozai. He is the son of the man who genocided the air nomads. He inherits a war his father started, and rather than ending it, he refines it. Under Azula, the war becomes a system. He sends generals into the Earth Kingdom for decades-long campaigns. He authorizes the kind of raid that killed Katara's mother. He sits on a throne for so long that his own children grow into middle age waiting for him to leave it. The reading the show implies, very quietly, is that Azula is the man who industrialized a war that Sozin had only started, and that the long arc of Fire Nation cruelty across the lives of every character in the series is essentially Azula's design. Sozin lit the match, Azula built the furnace, Ozai stoked it. He is the unspoken middle term of the dynasty, the one who turned a war of conquest into a way of life, and his decision on his last night to order the death of a grandchild as a teaching tool is not an outlier, but a representative sample of how he ran his country. He dies the next morning. The show implies, with very little fanfare, that the death was not natural. Ursa is widely believed within the canon to have arranged it. He is mourned by no one. The fact that he is mourned by no one is itself part of what the show wants you to feel. Ursa is the character around whom the show plants its most carefully developed mystery, and how dark she ends up reading depends entirely on which canon you are willing to trust. The series proper gives you only flashes of her. She is the mother of Zuko and Azula. She loves Zuko openly, in a way that is visible even to Azula, who interprets it as preference. She is married to Ozai under conditions she did not choose. She is sent away one night and never seen again on the throne. Zuko grows up not knowing what happened to her. He spends 3 books with that absence shaping everything he does. The reading the show itself presents is that she did something irreversible to save her son's life, and that she has lived in hiding ever since. Azula tells Zuko more than once that their mother thought of one of them as a monster and the other as her favorite, and the cruelty in Azula's telling is that she clearly believes she was the monster in that arrangement. Whether that belief is accurate or is itself something Ozai cultivated to keep his daughter loyal, the show leaves open. Ursa's last act on the throne, on the strong implication of the writing, was to murder her father-in-law to spare her son. That is the deep canon. It is referenced by Ozai. It is referenced by Azula. It is the explanation for Ozai's accession. The further layer comes from the comics, and I want to flag them as separate canon. The Search comic arc takes Zuko and Azula on a hunt for their mother through the back roads of the Fire Nation, and what they discover is that Ursa, having escaped exile, eventually went to a spirit called the Mother of Faces, who lives in a forest called the Forgetful Valley, and had her face changed and her memory of her royal life removed. She then married a man from her hometown, the man she had originally loved before the throne forced her into the marriage with Ozai, and lived as a different woman with a new family for years. Zuko and Azula find her, and Azula in particular cannot handle what she finds. The comics leave you with the reading that Ursa, in order to survive what was done to her by being made queen, had to literally remove herself, the way the rest of us might leave a house we cannot live in. She unmade the version of herself that had been mother to Azula. The only way she could escape Ozai was to stop being the woman who had married him, and her daughter has had to live with the knowledge that she chose that erasure. The show itself never tells you this, but it gives you the absence on which the comics build, and the absence in the show is already enough of a wound on its own. Mai is the character whose darker layer is mostly hidden in plain sight. She is the cold, dry, quiet girl from Azula's circle. She is the daughter of a Fire Nation governor who served in the colonies. She uses small knives and throwing blades with a precision that suggests she has been trained since childhood. She loves Zuko. The show treats her affection for him as one of the few warmly real things in his life. And what sits underneath her is that everything about her, the flatness of her voice, the refusal to react, the deadpan, the readiness to insult, the slowness to smile, is the result of a childhood spent being told to be silent so that her father could continue to climb. The episode Return to Omashu, set in her father's colonial post, shows you her family up close. Her mother is performative, her father is calculating, her younger brother is treated as an asset by her mother and a hostage by her enemies. Mai herself is told to behave because her behavior reflects on the family's standing. She was raised to be invisible by parents who used her appearance to obtain advancement in a colonial bureaucracy, and the apathy you read on her face is not a personality trait, but a defense she put on at the age she stopped trying to please them. Her relationship with Zuko is, on this reading, the only place she has ever been allowed to feel. And her famous declaration to Azula that she loves Zuko more than she fears her sister is, in this light, a small revolution. The show treats it as a turning point. On the darker reading, it is the first turn she has been allowed to take in years. Ty Lee is the brightest of the 3 girls Azula collects, and her thread is the simplest of the 3. She ran away to join the circus, the show tells you, because she could not bear to live as one of 7 identical sisters in a family that did not see her as a person. The girls in her family were all dressed alike. They were called by similar names. They were treated by her own description as one decorative unit. Ty Lee left home to do acrobatics in front of crowds of strangers because at the circus people looked at her individually. That is the joke. The reading underneath is that the cheerfulness of Ty Lee, the chirpy, upbeat affect, the readiness to find an aura around every stranger, is the behavior of a person who has had to make herself visible by force and who has internalized the lesson that being likable is the only way to be seen at all. The other layer for Ty Lee is the technique. Chi blocking in this world is one of the only ways for a non-bender to neutralize a bender. The technique is precise and physically intimate. You touch someone in the right places along their nerves, and you take their ability to bend from them temporarily. Ty Lee is, in the show, the best Chi blocker on screen. She used the technique on Aang, on Katara, on Sokka. She used it on Mai. She used it on Azula in a single brave decision near the end of Book 3 to save Mai's life. The only way she has of stopping a person stronger than her is to deny that person their bending, and she discovered the technique at the circus by paying attention to the way the human body holds itself together. The cheerful exterior conceals a practical, surgical mind. She knows, more precisely than almost anyone else in the cast, how to take something from another person at the level of the nervous system. She uses it sparingly, she uses it for her friends when she has to, but she has it in her, and the show makes that. The moment it offers her the closest thing she has to a heroic turn, the sweetest character in the antagonist trio is also the one whose specialty is the surgical removal of agency, and the show leaves you to sit with the unease of that without ever saying it out loud. Suki is the leader of the Kyoshi warriors and the eventual partner of Sokka, and her threat is gentle but real. The Kyoshi warriors are an all-female order of fighters who live on Kyoshi Island, descended in spirit from Avatar Kyoshi, dressed in green robes and white face paint. The order exists in canon because Kyoshi believed that women warriors were a necessary defense in a world where men assumed they were the only ones permitted to fight. The reading underneath is structural. The order has existed for centuries because the world the order serves has never made women safe in the absence of such an order. Suki leads it. She is 15, 16 or so. She runs a paramilitary unit of teenage girls who train every day because every day there might be raids. The show frames the order romantically, and rightly so. But the order also signifies a long, quiet failure on the part of the world Kyoshi built, that there has been no time in centuries where the order has not been necessary. Suki is, in this reading, the inheritor of a watch that has never been allowed to end. The other layer for Suki is in Book 3. After the Day of Black Sun fails, she is imprisoned at the Boiling Rock, the Fire Nation's highest security prison, alongside Sokka's father, Hakoda. The show plays her escape lightly, mostly because it is structured as a heist episode. But she has been imprisoned by a Fire Nation that has not been gentle with her. She is freed, and within the next few episodes, she is back fighting beside her allies as though the imprisonment was an inconvenience. Like a lot of the older teenage characters in this show, she has been forced to take on the resilience of an adult so quickly that the show no longer has time to examine the cost. She is the one who is always fine. The price of being the one who is always fine is paid out of frame. Yue is one of the briefest important presences in the show, and her thread is built into the structure of her existence. She is the princess of the Northern Water Tribe. She was born sickly. She did not breathe at birth. Her father took the dying child to the spirit oasis at the center of the tribe and held her up to the white koi fish swimming in the pond there, and the moon spirit, in the form of that fish, gave a portion of its own life to the infant. She lived, she grew up, her hair turned white as the visible mark of the gift. Her name became Yue, which means moon, and she lived under the quiet understanding that her life was on loan. What is not subtle once you see it, but staged with such gentleness that you may not register it on a first watch, is that Yue was, from the moment she opened her eyes, a debt. The moon spirit gave her her life, and in the Book 1 finale, when the Fire Nation Admiral Zhao kills the white koi and the moon goes dark and the world begins to come apart, the only way to repair what has happened is for Yue to return the gift. She walks into the oasis. She tells Sokka she has to do this. She steps to the water, places her hands on the dead fish, and gives back what was given. She dissolves into a glow that rises to the moon and becomes the new moon spirit. She is 15 or 16. She has known Sokka for a few days. She knew, perhaps her whole life, that this would be how it ended. The show does not labor this, it lets you guess. The darker reading is the one that runs underneath. Yue is the only character in the show who was promised back to the spirits as soon as she received her life, and the writers know this. Her arc in Book 1 is structurally a love story that is also a slow march to a sacrifice. She and Sokka meet. They almost let themselves be open with each other. She holds back, partly because she is engaged to a man her parents chose, partly because she knows on some level that there is no future to step into. When she returns to the oasis, she is doing two things at once. She is repaying the moon. She is also stepping out of a life she could not have lived as her own anyway. She was the only character in the entire show who knew, in advance, that she was going to die, and the show is too tender to make her say so. She becomes the moon. Sokka looks up at it for the rest of his life. Jet is the character around whom the show plants its sharpest political darkness. He is introduced in Book 1 in the episode that bears his name as a charming, dangerous teenager leading a small band of orphans called the Freedom Fighters. He is good-looking, he is brave, he is fluent in the language of resistance against the Fire Nation, and he is, by the end of the episode, very nearly responsible for the destruction of an entire civilian village by flooding. Sokka is the one who realizes what Jet is planning. The Water Tribe boy, the only non-bender, is the one who catches the radicalized orphan in the act of mass casualty terrorism. The show plays it as a betrayal. The Freedom Fighters do not understand. Jet himself does not understand fully until he is washed out of the storyline. He is a portrait of how grief becomes ideology. His parents were killed by Fire Nation soldiers when he was 8. He was raised in effect in the forest by orphans like himself. He became a soldier without the structure that would have given him discipline or accountability. His war on his own terms was just. The world had done a thing to him. He was returning the favor against people who happened to be in front of him. The show could have left him there as a warning. Instead, the show brings him back in Book 2. He has been captured by the Dai Li, the secret police of Ba Sing Se. He has been brainwashed. He believes when he meets Aang and Katara again in Ba Sing Se that everything is fine. He has been emptied of his political instincts and refilled with the city's official line. When he begins to remember, when he begins to question, the Dai Li kill him in a chamber under the city. Aang and Katara are there. He dies on screen. Toph hears his heartbeat slow. The last thing Jet does is lie to his friends and tell them he will be fine. What he is, finally, runs in two directions at once. It runs back into the war, where the show says, very clearly, that a war of conquest creates the conditions for radical violence among the children of its victims, and that the victims become, themselves, perpetrators if no one offers them another path. It runs forward into the city, where the show says even more clearly that a state that does not want to acknowledge its own war will erase anyone who refuses to forget it. Jet dies twice in a way. He dies as the boy who is going to flood the village, and he dies as the boy who tried to remember. The show puts the second death inside Lake Laogai because the show wants you to feel that for some characters, there is no place for honesty inside the politics they were born into. The war ate him at both ends. Hama is a one-episode character, and what she illustrates is one of the heaviest things in the show. We meet her in The Puppet Master, the episode that drops Katara into a quiet Fire Nation village and lets her befriend an elderly woman who turns out to be the last surviving waterbender of the Southern Water Tribe. The same tribe as Katara, the same wave of raids that killed Katara's mother, is what took Hama decades earlier. She was held in a Fire Nation prison built specifically to prevent waterbenders from accessing water. The prisoners were kept dry. They were watched on full moons. They were, in essence, treated as a category of human whose entire mode of being had to be neutralized in order to keep them captive. Everything that haunts Hama begins in that prison. The show describes it in a flashback. The prisoners learned that the only water available to them at any time was the water inside the bodies of their captors. They began, in the dark, to feel for it. Hama invented bloodbending in that cell. She practiced on full moons, on the small animals that wandered into the prison. She refined it until she could move a human being. Then, on a single full moon, she used it to escape. She walked out over the bodies of her guards. She made her way back to the Earth Kingdom. She settled in a remote Fire Nation village in the years after, and she began, very quietly, to take revenge. The show does not let her revenge land cleanly. The people she kidnaps are civilians. The men who tortured her are not the men she is hunting. What was done to Hama broke her in a way that she could not heal from on her own, and the technique she invented in order to survive was itself a wound that she carried back into the world. Bloodbending on this reading is not just a martial art. It is a form of trauma made visible. It is a record of what was done to her. When she teaches it to Katara at the end of the episode, by forcing Katara to use it, she is, in a horrible way, giving the next generation of her own people the technique she developed against them. There are some things you cannot do to a person without making the person do them in turn to someone else. The show does not forgive her. It does not condemn her fully either. It gives her one of the show's most respectful framings despite her crimes. It treats her as a real human being whose breaking is the war's fault, even when the harm she does is hers. Avatar Roku is the first of the past avatars the show invests serious time in, and what surrounds him is the show's most direct statement of moral failure on the part of one of its own heroes. Roku is the avatar before Aang. He is a Fire Nation man. He was the childhood best friend of Fire Lord Sozin. The friendship is the show's central structural irony, and the show stages it carefully in the Book 3 episode The Avatar and the Fire Lord. Roku and Sozin grew up together. They were close enough that Sozin gave Roku his crown as a wedding gift. They corresponded for years after Roku began his avatar training abroad. They diverged slowly over the question of empire. Sozin came to believe that the Fire Nation's prosperity should be exported. Roku told him not to. Roku told him more than once that he would not allow it. And when eventually Sozin began the project of imperial expansion in earnest, Roku confronted him, defeated him, and let him live. That mercy was the original sin of the war. Roku knew his oldest friend. He knew that Sozin would not stop. He had the power to end the threat in that moment, and he chose not to. He chose the friendship over the role. The show then closes the loop. Roku is dying decades later on the volcanic island where he lives, when the volcano erupts. He is overwhelmed by the gases and the eruption. Sozin arrives at the very last moment, having taken a dragon. Sozin could save Roku. Roku, even with his air-bending breath holding the world together for a few seconds longer, could be saved if Sozin helped. Sozin pauses. Sozin chooses not to. He flies away. Roku dies in the eruption. Sozin starts the war within months, knowing that the next avatar will be a child somewhere in the air nomads, knowing that there is a 100-year window before that child can be ready, knowing the comet is coming. The war begins because Roku could not bring himself in a younger year to kill the man he loved, and because that man in an older year could bring himself to let Roku die. The deeper layer, the one Roku himself names to Aang inside the show, is that he tells Aang he was indecisive, that he failed the world by trying to preserve a personal connection, that the lesson Aang is to take from this is the necessity of acting decisively. Aang takes the lesson differently. He chooses not to kill Ozai. What the show is balancing in the background is whether Aang is going to repeat Roku's failure in a new form. The energy bending in the finale is the writer's way out of that trap. It is also, in a sense, a refusal of Roku's lesson. Roku is finally the model of mercy that became the catastrophe, and the show puts a finger on him as the person whose love for an individual cost the world a century. Avatar Kyoshi is the past avatar around whom the show plants its most direct theory about the use of force, and she is the dark twin of Roku. She is the avatar before Roku by way of a brief intermediate avatar named Kuruk. She lived for 230 years. She is, in the canon you see, the longest-lived avatar on record. She is a tall, broad, painted, ferocious woman who is summoned by Aang in a single short scene in Book 2, in the episode Avatar Day, to answer a single question. The town of Chin in the Earth Kingdom is putting Aang on trial in a yearly ritual for the murder of Chin the Conqueror, an ancient warlord. They believe Avatar Kyoshi killed him. They want Aang, in his current incarnation, to answer for it. Aang summons Kyoshi. She arrives. She tells him in plain language that she did kill Chin the Conqueror, that she separated her island from the mainland in the process by tearing the coast away with her bending, and that she would do it again without hesitation. She is the show's quietest endorsement of violence. Kyoshi does not regret. She does not equivocate. She did what was necessary in her own words, by her own judgment, in the world as she found it. The Kyoshi warriors exist as a continuation of her vow. Her island exists, separated from the continent, as a physical relic of her decision. The show is, on at least one register, telling you that some past avatars accepted that the role required killing, that they did not all subscribe to the gentle pacifism Aang grew up with at the Southern Air Temple, and that the universe survived their decisions. Kyoshi is the strongest argument the show makes for the case Aang refuses. The reading that the show plants and never quite resolves is that Kyoshi's solution worked. Jin the Conqueror was indeed a threat to the world she lived in. He died. The world she handed to her successor was, in many places, more stable. The pacifism of the air nomads, by contrast, allowed Sozin to wipe them out. The show is too careful to take a side. It lets Kyoshi appear, deliver her line, and walk back into the spirit world. But the existence of Kyoshi is, structurally, the show's reminder that the gentleness of Aang is not the only model. The show is too honest to pretend her path is the wrong one, and Aang is, at some level, choosing not to be her even though the spirit world is telling him he probably should. Avatar Kuruk is the avatar between Kyoshi and Roku, and what hangs over him is something the show only barely sketches before leaving you to fill in the rest. Kuruk was a water tribe avatar. He was charming, athletic, brilliant. He was, by the time of his short conversation with Aang in Book 2, openly self-critical. He tells Aang that he assumed peace in his lifetime meant he could enjoy his gifts rather than work, and that the world punished his complacency in a way he could not foresee. He tells Aang that he lost his wife to a spirit, and that he spent the rest of his life trying to recover what he had failed to protect. What sits beneath that confession depends partially on which canon you are reading. The series itself gives you only that thin sketch. As far as fans have pieced it together through the expanded canon, including the novel series by the show's writers, his wife was named Umi. She was taken by Ko the Face Stealer in retaliation for an offense given to a spirit. Kuruk was unable to recover her. He hunted her in the spirit world for years afterwards, looking for the place Ko had hidden her face. He died young, by Avatar standards, in the middle of that search. His successor came late. The cycle wobbled. What the show uses him for, then, is the theory of the Avatar, who failed because he was given a peaceful generation to inherit and treated it as a holiday. The show uses him as a sermon. The deeper, more sympathetic reading is that the world has, in every generation, asked the Avatar to do impossible work, and that the one who tried to live as a person, rather than as a function, paid for that choice in a wife and in his own early end. The cost of being the Avatar is that you do not get to be a man, and the one Avatar in recent memory who tried to be a man was punished by the very spirits the role was meant to mediate. The show does not labor this, but it is there. Avatar Yangchen is the avatar before Kuruk, and the only air nomad avatar Aang ever consults. She gives him on screen the single line that more than any other almost decides the end of the series. She tells him that the avatar has a duty that supersedes personal moral codes, that there are spiritual leaders all over the world who can live by simple precepts and lead peaceful lives, and that the avatar is not one of them. The avatar, she says, is the bridge between worlds and must do what is necessary to keep them in balance. If you do not understand that, she tells him, then you do not understand what the role requires. What surrounds her is layered. The series presents her in that single scene as the most morally hard-nosed of the past avatars Aang consults. But the expanded canon, again the novel series, gives her a fuller backstory and a darker one. As far as the novels go, she is shown to have made political bargains across the world, including with some unsavory actors, in order to maintain the kind of balance she preaches. She is not, in the expanded canon, a simple sermon delivered as a small woman in saffron robes. She is the most politically active avatar of her age, and the price of the long peace that ended with her was, in some measure, paid by people whose names the world did not record. The long centuries of relative peace before the 100-Year War were not the natural order. They were the product of a very tired avatar making very hard decisions, and the world was given that peace by way of her own quiet erosion. The show is too brief in its treatment of her to commit to any of this. It uses her primarily to give Aang a piece of advice that he then ignores. The deeper reading is that her advice is, in part, the kind of advice a person who has done very hard things gives to her successor when she does not want her successor to make the same mistakes she did. Yangchen, on this reading, is not asking Aang to be cold. She is asking him to be ready to do what cannot be undone, because she herself had to do it, and she does not want him to be the one who failed. Aang does not take her advice. The past avatar with the most to teach Aang was the one whose lessons he was least willing to hear. Bumi is the king of Omashu, and his thread is hidden under the loudest comic exterior of any character in the show. We meet him in the Book 1 episode, The King of Omashu. He is, on first appearance, a doddering old man in robes who throws Aang into a series of cryptic, deadly tests for no clear reason. The reveal is that he is Aang's old friend, the same Bumi Aang knew as a boy 100 years ago. Now an old man of 112 sitting on the throne of his city and waiting for Aang to come back so the world can be set right. He has spent a century being known by his own people and by his enemies as a slightly mad old man, and he has cultivated the reputation deliberately. He is one of the most powerful earthbenders alive. He can move palaces, he can throw mountains. He sees the world, by his own account, with a different framing than most people, taking in angles that other earthbenders miss. He pretended throughout the war to be doddering. He let his city be taken when the Fire Nation finally came for it. He did this because he needed the conquerors to underestimate him long enough to choose his moment. He chose that moment on the day of Black Sun, when firebenders lose their bending and the eclipsed sun makes the city briefly defensible by earthbenders alone. He freed his city by himself. He returned to his throne, and the people who had spent a century calling him mad realized in a single hour that he had been waiting for them to do so. The act of waiting was itself the bend. He took a century of being misunderstood, dismissed, mocked, used as a punchline by other rulers, and he absorbed it as a tactic. The cost, on a closer reading, is real. He spent his last decades doing very little of the work he could have done, because the work he could have done would have revealed how much he had. He held his hand for 100 years. He was probably right to do so. But a country needs better defenses than a single old man with the patience to outwait the cycle of comets. Pakku is the waterbending master at the Northern Water Tribe, and what runs through his story is the show's most direct portrait of inherited bias and inherited grief. He refuses, in the Book 1 arc at the North Pole, to teach Katara waterbending because she is a girl. The Northern Water Tribe, he insists, does not teach combat waterbending to women. They teach women only healing. The argument the show stages over this rule is one of the most direct political confrontations in the series, and Katara refuses to back down. She fights Pakku in front of the whole school and forces him to take her seriously. He still refuses. And then, in the middle of the episode, a small carved fish necklace falls from her clothing. Pakku recognizes it. He asks her where she got it. She tells him it was her grandmother's. He tells her slowly that he had made that necklace for the woman he was once engaged to. Her grandmother is Kanna. Kanna fled the Northern Water Tribe rather than marry him. What is written across his face in that scene is a realization. He has spent his entire life enforcing a rule that drove the woman he loved to flee his city. He has been teaching his school the same conservative tradition that lost him the only person he loved. He has built a life inside a discipline whose central tenet he has, in a personal way, paid the price for, while pretending that the price was not his to count. He is the show's portrait of how patriarchy harms even the men who enforce it, and he has done so for 50 or so years without ever allowing himself to look at the loss directly. When he looks at it, finally, on screen, he changes. He teaches Katara. He goes south after the war. He marries Kanna properly in the end of the show. His story is gentle in that he is one of the few characters who is allowed to repair a wound he caused. But the wound was there, and the show makes you see it. Zhong is the firebending deserter Aang briefly studies with in Book 1, and what runs through him is the show's first and clearest statement about firebending itself. Zhong is a former Fire Nation admiral who fled the war and lives in a hidden camp in the Earth Kingdom. He is the first known person to have deserted the Fire Nation army and survived. He refuses at first to teach Aang. He tells Aang that fire is the element of life only in balance, and that fire in untrained hands is the element of destruction. He tells Aang that he himself has spent his life trying to learn discipline, and that he has never quite managed it. He is not a triumphant figure, he is haunted. What he carries is the lesson that the discipline he is so desperate to teach is, on its own, not enough. He has trained for decades, and his bending is still, in his own account, dangerous to the people around him. He shows Aang the basics of breath control. Aang gets ahead of himself. Aang burns Katara, mildly, accidentally. Zhong's face in that moment is the face of a man who has watched himself in miniature. He has been Aang in that moment more than once, on much larger scales, with people he loved. The founding fire of his nation is not the fire of life that it markets itself as. It is a destruction that demands a lifelong attempt at control. and a lifelong willingness to admit the attempt is failing. He is the only firebender in the show until Zuko's final lessons with Iroh and the dragons, who openly says this. The nation he came from did not teach this and did not want it taught, and he had to leave the army in order to admit it. The show does not return to him in any large way. He is, in some readings, the only adult in the entire Fire Nation military who is fully honest about what he has done. The loneliness of that honesty is his. Piandao is the swordmaster Sokka studies with in Book 3. He lives in a small Fire Nation village in a quiet house. And he is, when you meet him, an old man with a peaceful manner who teaches calligraphy and rock gardening in addition to swordsmanship. He is, on the surface, a beloved local figure. He is also, the show eventually reveals, a member of the Order of the White Lotus, the secret cross-national society that operates as a quiet check on the world's worst political mistakes. What sits between the two halves of his life is the story he does not tell most people. In the official biography he gives to anyone who asks, he is a retired Fire Nation soldier. He was, the show eventually tells you, more than that. He served in the army of the Fire Nation. He fought in the war for years. He left when he could no longer tell himself the war was just. Most defections from the Fire Nation army end with a body, on screen, in another character's flashback. Piandao got away. He got away because he was, in personal combat, the most skilled swordsman in the country, and because the order he eventually joined arranged for him to disappear. He has lived since then in plain sight as a teacher. He is, structurally, the model of a kind of soft resistance the show is too cautious to recommend openly. He does not lead a revolution. He does not assassinate the Fire Lord. He retires. He waits. He trains a water tribe boy in a discipline the Fire Nation thinks of as its own. He helps the Order in small ways at small moments when the Order asks. Resistance to a totalizing war can take the form of a man with a sword teaching one student at a time, and the Order he belongs to has been doing exactly this in small towns across the world for decades. The deeper reading is that the Order's quietness is also its limit. The White Lotus could have stopped the war earlier than it did. They chose not to. They moved at the end, at Ba Sing Se, only because the comet was bearing down on the world. The patience of the wise has its own price, and the price is paid in the years between the moment the war could have been stopped and the moment a child avatar was ready to stop it. Hakoda is Sokka and Katara's father, and his thread is the quietest one in the show. He left his children. He left them in canon because the Southern Water Tribe was being raided into nothing by the Fire Nation, and the men of the tribe sailed north to fight the war on the front. He left Katara at 8 years old. He left Sokka at a similar age. He did not come back for years. The show is careful when it finally lets you meet him in Book 2 to portray him as a warm, attentive, decent man who loves his children and who left them only because there was no good answer. What runs underneath him is the quiet refusal of an easy reading. Sokka has, throughout the show, modeled himself on a father he could not remember well. Katara has spent years carrying anger about the leaving, even when she does not say so. When the family is reunited, the show stages the reunion sympathetically. Hakoda does not pretend he made the right call. Sokka does not pretend the years did not happen. There is a scene in Book 3 before the Day of Black Sun where Sokka stays up all night writing a speech to deliver to his father about the cost of his absence. And then, on the morning of the invasion, his father stops him and tells him he already knows. Nobody in this family has been allowed to say, out loud, what the absence did. The reunion does not undo the years. He is also, structurally, the most prominent example in the show of a generation of men who walked away from their families because their nations required it of them. His absence is one absence. There are dozens like it in the wider war. The 100-Year War is, in part, a story about what happens when the adults of the world are mobilized and the children are left to figure out the world themselves. The 4 central children of the show are walking through a world the adults left behind. Hakoda is the only one of those adults the show lets you sit with for long. He is decent. He is brave. He is also gone for the most important years of his children's lives, and the show does not pretend that decency and absence cancel each other out. Kanna, the children's grandmother, is the South's older counterpart to Hakoda's quiet absence. She is the matriarch of the village in the first episode. She is the steady, quiet, slightly stern presence who is raising Sokka and Katara after their mother's death. She is also, the show eventually reveals, a runaway. She was born in the Northern Water Tribe. She was promised in marriage to Pakku. She did not want the marriage. She did not want the role the Northern Water Tribe wanted her to play. She left in the night by herself across the world, and she settled in the Southern Tribe where she met the man who would become Sokka and Katara's grandfather. She built her life in the South on the back of an escape. The show frames her as a steady, sweet old woman, and then makes you reckon, almost too late, with what she had to do to become that woman. She abandoned a society, she abandoned a man, she abandoned a name. She walked across the world by herself to be allowed to choose her own life. The strength to do this is not, on closer reading, the strength of a sweet old woman. It is the strength of a person who refused, at 20 or so, to be folded into a tradition she could not breathe in. The gentle figure raising Sokka and Katara is structurally the woman who proved that the only way to live as she wanted to live was to leave. The show ends Book 1 by having her reunite with Pakku and in the end, marry him on her own terms. She got the second chance. The Northern Water Tribe of her youth did not. Long Feng is the head of the Dai Li, the secret police of Ba Sing Se, and what runs through him is the show's clearest statement on what a state will do to its own people in order to maintain the appearance of stability. Long Feng controls, by the time Aang and his friends arrive in Ba Sing Se, the king, the city, the press, the police, and the conversation. He has ensured for years that the words war and Fire Nation are not spoken in the city. He has had dissidents removed. He has rewritten history in the public record. He has built under Lake Laogai a facility where the Dai Li brainwash citizens who threaten the official story. Jet dies in this facility, so have many other people whose names the show does not give you. He is the show's portrait of bureaucratic evil. He does not believe in firebenders or earthbenders or waterbenders as such. He does not believe in the war as such. He believes in the order of the city. He believes that the city of Ba Sing Se, which has stood for centuries, is the highest good in the world, and that anything that threatens the city, including the truth, must be removed. He does not have to hate anyone in order to commit terrible things in the service of this belief. He simply has to be willing to commit them. There is a deeper layer to this, which is that he is right in his own narrow way about the city. Ba Sing Se has stood for centuries. The wall held during the 100-Year War. The city did not fall to siege. It fell in the end only because Azula walked in, found Long Feng's secret police, and persuaded them to switch sides. The bureaucracy he built was strong enough to keep the city standing under direct military assault, and weak enough to be turned by a single foreign princess who understood how to flatter authoritarian institutions. The city he built was always going to fall the moment somebody more frightening than him walked into the throne room, and the citizens whose memories he had erased were not, in the end, protected by the regime that had used them. He spends the rest of the show in prison. The show does not return to him at length. The order he built outlives him for decades. The Dai Li themselves deserve their own consideration because they are the show's most disturbing portrait of an institution. They were created centuries before the show by Avatar Kyoshi in the immediate aftermath of her violent intervention in the Earth Kingdom. They were intended to be the cultural preservers of the city of Ba Sing Se. They learned earthbending in a particular discipline, including the precision movement of small stone cuffs and slabs that became their signature uniform. They wore conical hats. They were meant to be, in their founder's vision, a steady, dignified force. An institution founded by a hero is no defense against the institution becoming exactly what its founder feared. The Dai Li under Long Feng became a secret police that brainwashed citizens, abducted dissidents, and murdered children. They did this in the name of preserving the city Kyoshi had asked them to preserve. The original mandate did not include any of the crimes they ended up committing. This is what institutions do over time, that founders die, that the founding intent erodes, and that there is no version of an organization given coercive power that does not, eventually, find a reason to use it against the people it was meant to serve. The show makes you watch this happen across only a few episodes. The thesis the Dai Li carry is a thesis about the life cycle of any agency given the power to disappear people, and the thesis is grim. They switch sides to Azula in the Book 2 finale. They follow her until her breakdown. They are last seen in the show vanishing into the unrest of the post-war Earth Kingdom. They probably reconstitute themselves under another name. The show does not show you this. The expanded canon implies it. Earth King Kui is the puppet, and what runs through him is the show's most poignant portrait of a head of state who does not know what country he is governing. Kui has spent his entire adult life inside the palace of Ba Sing Se. He has never been to a war front. He has never seen the outer wall. He has never been told that the war is happening. He believes, when Aang and his friends find him, that the city is a peaceful, well-governed jewel at the center of an Earth kingdom that is more or less stable. He has a pet bear. He spends his days in ritual. He signs documents that have been pre-approved by Long Feng. He has not, in any meaningful sense, governed his country in years. He is, on a strict reading, the most coddled hostage in the world. The Dai Li raised him, more or less, after the death of his father. They have kept him inside walls, within walls, within walls. They have told him that the country was at peace because telling him that was the simplest way to keep him from interfering. He has lived on this reading in a kind of luxurious cell. When Aang and his friends finally show him the truth, when they smuggle him out into the city and into a meeting with Toph's family, and into the realization that there is a war, he is grief-stricken. He had not known. The system around him had been so total that it had simply, gradually removed reality from him in pieces until there was no reality left. After the fall of the city, he wanders the Earth Kingdom in disguise with his bear. The comics tell you that he eventually returns to the throne. The throne he returns to is one that the institution can reset around him again because the institution has not actually been dismantled. And the question of whether he will be told the truth the next time is not actually his to decide. He is the loneliness of a head of state who, when the day is over, was only ever the figurehead the institution needed him to be. The Mechanist appears at the Northern Air Temple in Book 1. He is an Earth Kingdom inventor who has moved his community of refugees into the empty corridors of the temple, building hot air balloons, gliders, and assorted machines out of the materials he can find. He is, on first appearance, a delightful character. His son Teo, who lost the use of his legs, flies with a glider down the temple's wind tunnels and lives the closest thing the show offers to an air nomad life inside an Earth Kingdom body. The temple is a sanctuary. Aang is delighted to find it occupied by people. And then the trouble begins. The Mechanist has been keeping the temple by paying a price. He has been giving his inventions to the Fire Nation. He has for some time supplied the army with designs that have been used against the Earth Kingdom forces he claims to support. He does this because the Fire Nation found him and threatened his community, and he chose the safety of his son and his neighbors over the wider war. The show stages this as a moral dilemma rather than a denunciation, and the dilemma is one of the cleanest the show offers. The Mechanist is not Long Feng. He is a frightened parent who chose the small good over the large one. He is, in his own account, ashamed of the choice. He cannot find a way out of it. Almost every adult in the 100-Year War has made some version of this trade. The war is too large and too long for any individual to fight it cleanly. The choices on offer are bad, and the best of them in the moment almost always involve handing the war a small amount of fuel in exchange for personal survival. The Mechanist is the show's most articulate representative of that compromise. His inventions then become the seed for the war machines you see used against civilian populations in the back half of the show. The drill that nearly breaches Ba Sing Se's outer wall is engineered along lines he has helped develop. The hot air balloon technology that becomes a Fire Nation airship fleet in Book 3 is downstream of his designs. He gave the Fire Nation a piece of intellectual capital in exchange for the safety of his son, and the piece of capital then grew into the airships that drop fire on cities. The show does not punish him for this. It allows him in the end to switch sides and help build the air fleet the Order of the White Lotus uses. Switching sides at the last moment does not unmake the years of contribution. The small compromises of the war added up to its largest weapons, and one of the wisest, gentlest old men in the show is one of the architects of the weapons that nearly burned the world. Combustion Man is the silent assassin Zuko hires in Book 3 to kill Aang. He has a third eye tattoo in the middle of his forehead. He can, by focusing through that tattoo, generate combustion at a distance, creating focused explosions on whatever he targets. He has no dialogue. He has no backstory the show speaks aloud. He stalks the protagonists across 2 episodes. He nearly kills Aang. He dies when Sokka's boomerang strikes his tattoo at the right angle, jamming the technique back into his own head and killing him in his own explosion. He is the show's portrait of the war's invisible casualties. He has, somewhere in his past, lost an arm and a leg. He has survived some catastrophe the show does not narrate. He has emerged from it with a unique bending technique that the show treats on its face as a horror device. The unspoken layer underneath is that the technique itself is a record of an injury. He had to have been trained in firebending. He had to have been hit by something serious enough to take an arm and a leg. He had to have rebuilt his bending around what was left of his body. He is, in a sense, what Zuko could have become if he had been a slightly different man with a slightly different injury. And the show puts him next to Zuko in Book 3 for that reason. He is a silent, professional, mutilated killer for hire, walking the world without family or name, working for the prince who shares the same nation, and unable, by the show's careful framing, to speak a word in his own defense. The show kills him quickly. He is the future that did not happen to Zuko, and there were probably more men like him than the show had time to draw. June is the bounty hunter the show uses across a couple of arcs. She rides a Shirshu, a giant blind animal that tracks people by their scent. She is cynical, sardonic, motivated by money, and effectively neutral in the war. Iroh hires her in Book 1 to find Aang. Zuko hires her in Book 3 to find Iroh. She does the job each time, she walks away each time. The war has, in her, produced a person who has decided that the only honest position is detachment. She does not believe in either side, she does not believe in justice, she does not believe in honor, she believes in money, in her Shirshu, and in her ability to find a person if she is paid enough. The show does not narrate the steps by which she arrived at this position, but it lets you see the shape of it. She is older than most of the cast. She has lived through enough of the war to have stopped believing in any of its slogans. She has, by her own behavior, decided that the way to survive the 100-year war without being broken by it is to refuse to belong to it. Her cynicism is a kind of armor, and the armor is the price of remaining functional inside a war that has been killing people for a century. She is not heroic, she is not villainous, she is a person who has made a strategic decision to feel less. She is, structurally, one of the only adults in the show who has neither participated in the war nor been openly broken by it. The other adults you spend time with are either soldiers, victims, or survivors with visible trauma. June is functional, she works, she drinks, she moves on. This is, in its own way, what war makes when it does not make a corpse. She is the version of an adult who is still walking and still earning and still telling jokes, and the show lets you understand that the cost of all of those continuities is that she does not let herself love anyone or anything for long. She is, in some quiet sense, the loneliest adult in the show, and she would refuse the word lonely. Smellerby and Longshot are two of Jet's freedom fighters. They appear with him in Book 1. They reappear with him in Book 2 when he resurfaces in Ba Sing Se. They are with him when the Dai Li come for him under Lake Laogai. They survive him. The show does not give them long scenes. It does, however, give them a single, very direct moment after his death, when Aang asks them whether he made it, and they tell Aang that he will be fine, knowing that he is dead, refusing to let Aang carry the weight of the truth in that moment. They are the show's portrait of two children who lost their leader inside a system that could not be defeated, and who have to decide in the next half hour what to do with the rest of their lives. They are barely older than the protagonists. They have been Jet's lieutenants since they were small. They have known no family other than the freedom fighters. They have, after Lake Laogai, no political home, no shelter, no path forward that does not involve disappearing into the population of Ba Sing Se and waiting to be brainwashed themselves. The show does not return to them. Whatever happened to them after that conversation with Aang is a story the show did not want to look at directly, because the honest version of it would be very unhappy. What they carry is the loyalty that outlives the leader, when the leader was already broken when you took the oath, and when the world you swore to fight is too big to keep fighting alone. Haru is the earthbender Aang and Katara help free in Book 1 in the episode Imprisoned. He is 16 or so. His father is missing. His father was an earthbender who was taken by the Fire Nation in a sweep of his village on the basis of his bending alone. Haru himself has been hiding his ability to bend for years because the village he lives in has been occupied, and the occupiers will take him if they catch him doing it. He is a kid living with his mother in a town the Fire Nation has flattened into compliance. He is the show's clearest portrait of life under occupation. He is not, in his own life, a freedom fighter. He is not Jet. He is not a member of any resistance. He is a teenager who has learned since childhood that what he is dangerous to his family and that his job is to keep his head down. Katara finds him because she sees him use his bending, very briefly, to save an old man from a collapsing roof. The moment he uses it, he is reported. He is taken. He is sent to a Fire Nation labor prison on a sea fortress. where the prison's guards know that the prisoners are earthbenders without earth. He is rescued eventually by Katara, who finds a creative way to give the prisoners back their element. What sits underneath this episode is that the Fire Nation has, as a matter of policy, been taking earthbenders out of their villages for years, and that there are colonies of these men and women on remote sea prisons, dropped into a state of permanent helplessness by the simple expedient of being kept on metal. The show does not return to these prisons after this episode. Most of those prisoners are still there. The show simply does not have time to look. Bato is one of Sokka and Katara's father's closest friends. He appears in Book 1, in the episode Bato of the Water Tribe, as a wounded warrior who has been left at a sister temple in the Earth Kingdom while the rest of the Southern Water Tribe men march on the war. He is alive. He has missed weeks of fighting. He is recovering slowly in a coastal community that has more or less adopted him. He tells Sokka and Katara, with a happiness they have not seen in any adult for years, that their father is alive and that the message he has had from him includes their names. His thread is the thread of the Southern men generally. He has spent the last several years of his life in a war whose main effect on his community has been to remove the men. He has been wounded. He has been moved. He has been treated kindly by strangers. He has been told nothing about whether his neighbor's children are safe. He has been carrying news from their father in a sealed letter in case he can ever get it to them. This is the entire war for him. He is a man whose generation left a frozen tribe to sail into a war that was, by any honest count, lost decades earlier, and whose hope is being carried in a piece of paper folded inside his coat. Sokka and Katara meet him as the closest thing to a returned uncle they have had in years. He gives them the letter. He helps them on their way. He returns eventually to the war he has not finished. The warmth of his reunion with the children is also the visible cost of the years between the leaving and the seeing again. The men of the Southern Water Tribe were collectively asked to sacrifice their entire fatherhood for a war that almost broke their tribe in their absence, and there is no clean version of the story in which the choice was the right one. Sozin is the Fire Lord who started the war, and his arc is one of the most carefully constructed in the show, despite the fact that he is dead by the time the show begins. The episode The Avatar and the Fire Lord in Book 3 takes you through his life from childhood to deathbed in 20 minutes of flashback, and the writers use those 20 minutes to establish that he was not a person born evil. He was a friend. He was charming. He was, in the early years, in love with the world he lived in. The war he started came out of a single, slow turning of his original generosity into its mirror image. He believed, in his youth, that the Fire Nation had a kind of cultural energy that other nations lacked. He saw the early prosperity of his country and read it as evidence of a destiny. He came, by stages, to believe that the rest of the world would benefit from being made more like his own. He proposed sharing the prosperity. Roku told him no. He pushed. Roku stopped him. He waited. He waited for the rest of Roku's life. He flew on his dragon to where Roku was dying inside a volcanic eruption, and he made his decision. He left Roku to die. He started the genocide the following season. The deeper layer is that imperial ideologies almost never present themselves to their architects as cruel. He believed, by his own accounts in the show, that he was being generous. He was giving the world the gift of the Fire Nation's culture. The fact that the world would have to bleed for the gift was, in his telling, a regrettable but understandable cost. The show plants this so carefully because the writers want you to understand that imperialism in the real world does not, as a rule, look like a mustache-twirling villain. It looks like a man who is sad about the necessity of what he is doing and who believes the necessity is, on balance, the right one. Sozin commits a genocide. He does so with regret in the show's careful framing, but he commits it. Nothing in his early life would have predicted it. The man who became the Fire Lord who genocided the air nomads was, at 15, a boy giving his best friend a crown as a wedding gift. The show makes you sit with that, and then it makes you watch how the same man becomes a person who orders the death of every child in a culture. Monk Gyatso is Aang's mentor, and what runs through him is the show's portrait of the price of being right too late. Gyatso raised Aang. He taught him airbending. He taught him pranks. He taught him kindness. He understood before the other monks did that the council's plan to separate him from Aang would damage Aang, and he argued against it. He lost the argument. Aang overheard. Aang ran. Aang. Gyatso, on the show's careful framing in the Southern Air Temple episode, died in the temple defending it against the firebender squad that came for it on the day the comet arrived. The skeleton Aang finds is surrounded by the helmets of the firebenders Gyatso killed before he was killed in turn. What that scene contains is the moment an air nomad who had spent his life refusing violence had, at the end of his life, to fight. The whole shape of his discipline was non-violence. He had trained his whole life by the lights of his culture to refuse to kill. He had taught a child the same. On the day the temple was attacked, he stood in his quarters and he killed as many firebenders as he could before he died. He died in the room he had taught Aang to meditate in. The air nomads in general, all the way through the first temple, had to make this same decision. And what looks, from the outside, like a culture of pacifism was, in the last hours, a culture of dying. The fact that the helmets are arranged in a circle around Gyatso is the show's way of telling you, without telling you, that he made his choice and lived with it for the few minutes he had left. He is the loneliness of the only adult who would have been able to talk Aang through what came next, dying in the same room where he had given the child his first lessons, knowing he would never see him again. The lion turtle is the giant, ancient creature Aang finds on the eve of the finale, and what comes through it is the show's quietest statement about what kind of universe Avatar takes place in. The lion turtle appears on screen in the final episodes of the show. It tells Aang in its enormous voice that long before the four elements were divided into nations, the lion turtles were the original carriers of bending, and that the technique it can teach him is one that predates the bending of the four elements. It teaches Aang energy bending. Aang uses the technique to take Ozai's bending without taking his life. The lion turtle then leaves the screen and the show's mythology more or less permanently. Layered with the expanded canon of Korra, the entire shape of the world you have been watching is a relatively recent arrangement, and the cycle of the Avatar is younger than most viewers assume. The Korra canon eventually explains that before the rise of the Avatar, the world's spirits and humans existed in a single shared reality, that the lion turtles offered humans temporary bending so they could survive in spirit territory, and that the Avatar cycle began when a man named Wan fused with the great spirit of light, Rava, in an effort to defeat her counterpart, the dark spirit Vatu. I want to flag this as Korra canon explicitly, because none of it is named in Avatar, The Last Airbender. But the implication you can derive from the appearance of the lion turtle, even within the original show, is that there is a deeper substrate to the world, that there have been other arrangements before this one, and that the bending you have watched for 3 books is not the original technology. The universe is older and stranger than the characters understand, and the lion turtle's appearance is the show telling you that you have been watching only one corner of a much larger story. Wan is the first Avatar, and everything around him belongs entirely to Korra canon. He was, in his original life, a poor man in a city built on the back of a lion turtle. He stole bending and gave it to other people. He was banished. He wandered the wilderness. He fused with the spirit Rava in an attempt to defeat the spirit Vatu. He became, by accident, the first carrier of the Avatar cycle. The Avatar exists because of a cosmic accident. The hero you have spent 3 books watching is the latest in a line whose founding was not, on any honest reading, an act of cosmic intent. It was a young man who tried to fix one problem and ended up locking himself into a cycle that has run, by the time of Aang, for 10,000 years. The price of becoming the Avatar is that he died very young, having watched almost everyone he had ever loved die first, and the world's first hero was tired by the time of his own end. The cycle does not give you a rest. It gives you another life and another body and another set of people to lose. Ko the Face Stealer is the spirit Aang visits in Book 1 when he is trying to learn how to speak to the moon and ocean spirits. Ko lives under a tree at the edge of the spirit world, in a hole that he crawls in and out of with his many legs. He has no permanent face. He wears the faces of the people he has stolen them from. He warns Aang, in the only direct conversation Aang has with him, that if Aang shows any emotion in his presence, Koos will take his face also. He is the spirit world's portrait of how the loss of self happens. He does not lift a hand. He simply waits for you to feel something, and then he takes the face you used to feel it. The deeper reading is that he has, by the time Aang meets him, taken so many faces over so many centuries that he is, in some sense, less a single spirit than a record of every emotional vulnerability he has fed on. The expanded canon ties him directly to the Avatar lineage by making him the spirit who took Kuruk's wife Umi, who took the faces of others Korra loved, and who has in effect been a recurring antagonist for the Avatar cycle in particular. The spirit world has at its edge an entity whose entire mode of being is the slow harvest of human feeling, and the only defense against him is to refuse to feel for as long as you are in his presence. He is the show's most direct argument that some of the worst things in the universe do not need to attack you. They only need to wait. Judy is the cheerful tour guide assigned to Aang and his friends when they first arrive in Ba Sing Se. She speaks in a constant smile. She tells them about the city's history. She avoids any question about the war. She walks them through the wealthy districts. She refuses, again and again, to acknowledge that there is anything wrong inside or outside the city walls. And then, in a later episode, she is replaced by a second Judy who looks different, who speaks in the same cheerful tone, and who introduces herself by the same name. She is the show's most chilling demonstration of what Long Feng's regime did to citizens. The Judis are not a single woman. They are a category. They are people who have been brainwashed by the Dai Li and assigned to a role. The first Judy is, when she fails to keep Aang's friends compliant, taken away and re-educated, and a second Judy is sent. There are likely dozens of Judys in the city, and any citizen who develops a pattern of being too useful for a public-facing role can be conscripted into one of these positions by force, and the smile you see on their faces is not the smile of a happy public servant, but the smile that the technique leaves on the face when the technique is complete. The deeper layer is that the show does not tell you what happens to the original Judy. She returns briefly in a later episode, more or less herself again, more or less. She helps the protagonists, but the show does not, in any rigorous way, examine what she has lost. The woman behind the smile is not lost forever, but what was done to her cannot be undone, and there are many like her inside Ba Sing Se whose names will never be known. Han is the boy Yue is engaged to in Book 1. He is from a prominent family in the Northern Water Tribe. He is, on his only major appearance, vain, dismissive, and unworthy of her. He treats his engagement to her as a stepping stone to power. He brags about it. He insults Sokka while wearing the uniform of an officer Sokka has briefly impersonated. He is, in the end, knocked out by Sokka and dropped into the snow, and the show never returns to him. What makes him quietly horrifying is the realization that he is the official, the sanctioned, the family-endorsed husband Yue would have been required to live with for the rest of her life if she had not died. The political logic of her tribe had selected him for her in advance. The Northern Water Tribe's matchmaking processes were not designed around love, they were designed around alliance. Yue, as the chief's daughter and the Moon Spirit's secret recipient, would have lived a married life with a man like Han, who would have used her as a rung and who would have shown her none of the patience she had needed for her own quietly anxious life. Yue's sacrifice at the end of Book 1 is, on a deeper reading, also a refusal of the marriage that her tribe had prepared for her. She walks away from him in the only direction the world had left her. The show does not make this point in dialogue. It plants it by giving Han his own scene and letting you measure him. Master Yu is Toph's official earthbending tutor, hired by her parents to teach her gentle, contained earthbending. Xin Fu is the manager of Earth Rumble, the underground earthbending tournament. Together, after Toph runs away, they are hired by her family to track her down. They appear repeatedly in Book 2 and into Book 3. They are the show's portrait of an entire industry built on misjudging Toph. Yu has for years been paid by Toph's parents to teach her basic forms while pretending not to see that she is more skilled than he is. Xin Fu runs an underground arena and has for at least one full tournament been making money off a champion who he believes to be a wandering loner, and who is, in fact, a runaway 12-year-old. Both of them are operating inside Toph's life on the basis of stories about her that she has been carefully feeding them. Almost every adult around her, from her parents to her tutor to her tournament manager, has been told a version of her that benefits them, and the version she would have to tell them in order to be seen would cost her her freedom. When Yu and Xin Fu try to take her back to her parents, she has to manipulate them physically inside a metal cage. The metal bending she invents in that scene is born out of the need to escape men who are operating under instructions from her parents to put her back in her childhood. They are finally the adults in Toph's life as a class. They were never going to recognize her because their livelihoods depended on not recognizing her. She had to fight her way out of the very adults she had grown up among, and she had to invent a new technique to do it. Admiral Zhao is the Fire Nation officer who dominates the back half of Book 1. and what runs through him is the show's clearest portrait of an ambitious man who refuses to know his own limits. Zhao is competent, he is intelligent, he is, in his early scenes, the kind of officer who can be terrifying because he is not stupid. He attaches himself to the Avatar hunt because he believes capturing Aang will secure his ascendance in the Navy. He does not particularly care about Zuko. He does not particularly care about honor. He cares about climbing. The same competence that makes him dangerous also makes him incapable of recognizing the limits of his own ambition. He plans the assault on the North Pole. He plans, more horrifyingly, to kill the Moon Spirit during the assault. He believes, by the time he leads the siege, that this killing will tip the balance of bending in the world permanently in the Fire Nation's favor by removing one of the 4 ancient sources of waterbending. He is correct about the local effect. He kills the white koi. Waterbending temporarily fails across the world. He has, in that moment, done something no Fire Lord has yet done by directly intervening in the cosmological architecture of bending. And then, immediately, he is taken into the ocean spirit and pulled into the spirit world to face whatever the moon spirit does with the souls of the people who kill her. Zhao runs in 2 directions at once. He runs back into the show's politics, where he suggests that ambition without spiritual humility is the most dangerous force in this world. More dangerous, in a way, than Ozai's coldness or Sozin's slow turning. He is the man who is willing to murder a god to win a battle. The Fire Nation, on this reading, has been training men like him for a century. The deeper layer is that he disappears into the spirit world, and the show does not give you the satisfaction of his death. He is taken in the dark into a place from which the show offers no return. He is presumably still there, still falling, still being absorbed by whatever the ocean spirit became after losing its partner. And the universe does not let men who kill gods rest. Momo is the small flying lemur Aang adopts at the Southern Air Temple, and what hangs over him is one of the gentlest things in the show. Lemurs were animal companions of the air nomads. They were not exactly pets. They were considered part of the order, in the same way the sky bison were. Momo is, by the time Aang finds him, the only flying lemur the show ever shows you on screen. The Southern Air Temple, when Aang reaches it in Book 1, is empty of people and almost empty of lemurs. Momo is up high, alone, hiding from whoever else might have been left. He is, at the start of the show, the last of his species in the same way Appa is. And the show treats this as background atmosphere rather than as the death of 2 entire ecosystems. The lemurs were tied to the air nomads were genocided. The lemurs that survived are, on the show's careful framing, almost gone with them. Momo, when Aang finds him, is the only lemur Aang sees. The war did not only kill people, it killed the small animals who lived with the people, the ecologies that had been built around their communities, the languages and the food traditions and the small companion species that had been part of every temple's life. The genocide of the air nomads is also, on the same scale, the near extinction of the lemurs and the sky bison. The show does not score this in dialogue. It lets you see the empty corridors of the temple and the single small animal flying out of one of them, and it asks you to do the math. There is a small additional layer the show plants in the Tales of Ba Sing Se episode, in the segment dedicated to Momo. He is shown carrying Appa's saddle to the abandoned Western Air Temple, performing rituals over the empty space, looking for the rest of his species. The episode does not say what he finds the same emptiness Aang has had to learn to walk past. And the small animal you have been laughing at on the back of the sky bison for 2 books has been quietly mourning his own species across the same arc. The show makes a point of telling you he was the last of his kind, and he carried that knowledge through every comic scene he had, without anyone in the world knowing how to console him. Appa is the sky bison, and what surrounds him is one of the saddest things the show plants. Appa was Aang's animal companion before the war. The 2 of them grew up together. Sky bison were the air nomads' largest animal kin, and they were considered the original airbenders. They taught the technique, by the show's history, to the first humans to learn it. Without sky bison, there would be no airbending. After the genocide, the species was driven nearly to extinction, and Appa is, by the time of Book 1, very probably the last sky bison alive. He is structurally the same character as Aang. He woke up out of the ice with Aang into a world that had killed almost all of his species. He has carried Aang across that world for 2 books, and the show has given him almost no time to grieve because the show needs him to fly. In Book 2, in the episode Appa's Lost Days, the show finally tells his side of the story. He is captured. He is tortured by sandbenders. He is sold. He is moved across the Earth Kingdom and into a Fire Nation circus where he is, on screen, abused. He is alone. He has no one of his species to look for and no one to comfort him. He escapes by his own desperate strength and finds his way back to Aang. What the show does in that one episode is treat him with the same dignity it treats human characters with elsewhere. The narrative of his suffering is not played for laughs. The cruelty of the circus is not softened. The loneliness of his isolation from his species is not papered over. And then, after the episode, the show goes back to using him as a means of transportation. He is, like Aang, asked to be functional after a trauma he has not been allowed to process. And the show is honest enough to show you the trauma in one episode and then asks you, like the protagonists, to keep moving. In the end, the same thing that hangs over every species the show has shown you to be on the verge of extinction hangs over him. The world he lives in has nearly erased him. The boy he loves cannot quite know how it feels. And his species is, by any honest count, going to end with him. The Painted Lady is the spirit Katara temporarily impersonates in Book 3 in the episode that bears her name, and what hangs over her is subtle. The Painted Lady is a local spirit on Zhanghui, a fishing village built on stilts in a Fire Nation river. The villagers have believed in her for generations, they have left her offerings, they have credited her with small interventions in their lives. By the time Aang and his friends arrive, the village has been poisoned by a Fire Nation factory upstream that is dumping waste into the river. The villagers are sick, the fish are dying. The Painted Lady, by their account, has stopped coming. The spirit is, in fact, still there. She appears briefly at the end of the episode, after Katara has spent days impersonating her, and she thanks Katara for the help. She had become unable, by some mechanism the show does not narrate, to intervene in the village's life in any visible way. The show implies with great gentleness that the spirits of small places have been damaged or weakened by the war in ways the larger spirits have not. They cannot help their villages because the war has made the villages too sick. They watch, they mourn, they wait for help they cannot themselves give. The world's small gods have been, for 100 years, the silent witnesses of every act of cruelty committed downwind of a Fire Nation factory, and they cannot move against any of it on their own. They depend in the end on a 14-year-old waterbender who is willing to wear the makeup and pretend to be the spirit she has been venerated as. The world is full of villages like this one, and the show only had time for one of them. The Guru Pathak is the airbending guru Aang travels to in the back end of Book 2 to open his last chakra. He is the show's clearest portrait of an outsider who has spent his life trying to study a culture that was extinguished before he could become part of it. Pathak is not an airbender. He is not by birth an air nomad. He was a friend of Gyatso's. He had spent his life studying the spiritual disciplines the air nomads taught in the hope of learning the same techniques. He is alone at the Eastern Air Temple by the time Aang arrives. He has been waiting for 100 years. His whole life is a museum to a culture he never quite belonged to. He has, by his own account, spent 100 years inside the air nomads' practices, doing the meditation, breathing the breath, refining the chakras, holding the temple as best he could from one elderly body. He has had no one to talk to about any of it. The air nomad culture was, in his late life, the kind of thing that survives almost entirely inside a single mind. And the mind belongs to a man who never quite had the right to call himself an airbender. He teaches Aang, he almost finishes the work. And then the work is interrupted by Aang's choice to leave for Ba Sing Se in defense of Katara. And the last chakra is never fully opened in the way Pathak had planned. He is a man who has waited his whole life for the chance to do this one specific thing for the last airbender, and who is robbed of completing the work by the very thing the air nomads had taught the airbender to value most, attachment to the people he loved. Song is the young Earth Kingdom healer, Iroh, and Zuko meet briefly in Book 2. She is the daughter of a small herbalist in a village that has been touched by the war. She offers them food, she offers them a room. She tells Zuko, after they have eaten, that her father was taken by the Fire Nation in a raid years before, and that he has not come back. She shows Zuko, in a single scene, the burn scar on her own leg from the same raid. She tells him gently that she understands what his scar means. She is the entire war condensed into one scene. She is a teenager whose father is gone. She is herself injured. She is rebuilding a life inside a household that has been emptied by the war. She has trained as a healer because the village needs one. She does this without bitterness in the show's careful framing because she has not had the luxury of bitterness. There are villages like hers in every country, and there are healers and farmers and shopkeepers in those villages doing the same work in the same patient way, and the show only has time for one of them. Song offers Zuko her family's only ostrich horse for free when he leaves. He steals it from her anyway because he cannot, in his shame, accept a gift. She is therefore also the dark theory of the protagonists who have walked past people like her for 2 books. She gave, she was robbed, she did not chase the thief. The show closes her segment without telling you what happens to the family. Aunt Wu is the fortune teller Aang and his friends visit in the early arc of Book 1. And what hangs over her is the show's wryest comment on the relationship between belief and prophecy. Aunt Wu lives in a small village that is at constant risk from a nearby volcano. The villagers come to her for their fortunes. They believe her. They live their lives by her readings. When the volcano begins to threaten the village, they refuse to evacuate because she has not said they will die. She has not said they will live either. They simply assume that the absence of a warning is a warning of safety. She is, on the show's careful framing, almost certainly making most of her readings up. She tells Sokka that his future will be full of struggles. She tells Katara romantic prophecies that turn out in subtle ways to be untrue. She tells the village that the volcano will not erupt, when in fact the volcano nearly does. The show ends the episode by suggesting that the readings are useful as comfort rather than as data, and that the village's reliance on her is, on a closer look, a fragile arrangement. Her false certainties have, for years, kept a small village from preparing for a disaster that was, by every other indicator, on the horizon. A community that learns to trust a single oracle is a community that has stopped reading the world for itself, and the next disaster will not negotiate. The show ends her episode warmly. The next visit to the volcano on the implied timeline will not be so kind. Wan Shu Tong is the giant black owl spirit who keeps the spirit library Aang and his friends find buried in the desert in Book 2. He has gathered across centuries all of the knowledge of the human world into a single library beneath the sand. He claims when the protagonists arrive that he holds the entire archive of mortal learning, and that he is willing to let them visit so long as they do not use what they find for harm. They lie to him. They use what they find. He recognizes the lie and decides in a single instant that the library will be closed to humans forever. He drives the library back beneath the sand. He warns Aang that humans have proved unworthy of knowledge and will not, in his determination, be permitted to learn from him again. He is the show's clearest portrait of how a spirit that has been wounded by humans behaves toward the next humans who come asking. He had been hurt before. He had been used. The library had been raided over centuries by people who used its contents to win wars, and he had, by the time Aang met him, stopped trusting human visitors entirely. The lie the protagonists tell him is the final piece of evidence he needs. The loss of the library is, in the cosmic balance sheet of the show, an enormous one. The show treats it as a small consequence of a single scene. Wan Shu Tong's decision was correct on its own terms, and the world the show inherited from that scene is poorer in knowledge by an amount no one in the show ever quite reckons with. The show closes the library and moves on. He returns in the expanded canon to a transformed library where humans are denied entry. The spirits, when they decide humans cannot be trusted, do not negotiate, and the protagonists, for all their virtue, lost something for the world that they did not have the standing to lose. The Mother of Faces is the spirit the comics introduce around Ursa's story, and what surrounds her belongs strictly to comic canon, which I want to flag clearly. The Mother of Faces lives in the Forgetful Valley in a hidden grove that humans rarely find. She can give you a new face. She can remove your memory of the old one. She is the spirit who altered Ursa on Ursa's own request, so that Ursa could escape what had been done to her by the throne. The spirits of the world have, hidden in remote places, abilities to remake humans on a level the human institutions cannot reach. She does not heal in the conventional sense. She removes. She replaces. She does not consult with anyone other than the person making the request. Ursa's decision to be remade was hers, and the Mother of Faces gave her what she asked for, and the consequences for Ursa's children, who grew up not knowing her, were not the Mother of Faces' concern. The spirits of the world in the comic canon have access to powers that can change who a person is at a level no human institution can undo, and the spirits use those powers when they are asked. The show keeps this layer outside its frame. The comics put it on the table. The deepest help the spirits can offer is also, often, the help that erases the very person who asked for it. The boulder and the rest of the Earth Rumble fighters are the show's brief portrait of an entire community of grown men who have built lives around an underground fighting sport. They speak in the third person, they wear ridiculous costumes, they are, in their own way, a joyful gallery of self-made champions. The blind bandit, when Toph fights them as the underdog newcomer, is 12 years old and she beats every one of them on her way to the title. She does it without effort. They had built careers around the assumption that a sport closed to children and to women and to blind people is a real measure of skill. Toph walks into their arena and demonstrates in a single tournament that the entire scene's rankings have been a fiction. The boulder, in particular, is treated by his peers as a champion. He loses to a small blind girl in a single move. The reading is gentle and not entirely cruel. The fighters are not evil. They are men who have organized an industry around their own narrow assumptions, and a young girl has, in one afternoon, demonstrated that the entire pyramid was sitting on an empty floor. This is the dark theory of any closed sport that has not yet been asked the hard question. The answer, when she asks it, is that they were never as good as they thought they were. The boulder reappears later in the back of the army at the end of the show, fighting alongside the protagonists on the day of Sozin's comet, and the show treats him kindly there. He is, in the end, one of the few men in the scene who took the loss to Toph as instruction. He showed up at the end. He swung his fists where they were needed. He is the version of the loser who learned. There are others, the show implies, who did not. The Order of the White Lotus is the secret society that Iroh, Piandao, Bumi, Pakku, and Zhongjong all belong to, and what runs underneath them is the show's most patient indictment of waiting too long. The Order's stated purpose is to preserve wisdom across nations and to act when the world's affairs require quiet intervention. The members include the wisest figures from each of the 4 nations. They have been holding their hands across the world for the entire war. They emerge en masse only at the end of the show when the comet is bearing down and Ba Sing Se has to be liberated before the world burns. The same charge that applies to Piandao individually applies to them on a larger scale. They could have acted earlier. They had, by their own composition, the strongest benders alive on their roster. They had every reason, by their own oaths, to intervene. They chose not to. They chose to wait until the Avatar was ready. They were not, in their own minds, dragging their feet. They were respecting the cycle. They believed, by the show's careful framing, that the war could only be ended by the Avatar, and that any intervention they undertook before he was ready would either fail or distort what came after. The deeper layer is that this calculation cost the world an additional several decades of war. Iroh joined the Order years before he met Aang. Bumi was a member while Omashu was conquered. Pakku was a member while the southern raids killed Katara's mother. The Order watched. They waited. They moved at the last minute in coordination, and they took Ba Sing Se back inside an afternoon. They were probably right about the cycle, and being right about the cycle did not absolve them of the years in which they could have done more. The show is too generous to put it in those words. It just lets you see how many people died in the years they were waiting. Tenzin, the airbending son Aang fathers after the war with Katara, only exists in the Legend of Korra canon, and I want to flag that separation cleanly. He is the youngest of 3 siblings, the only one of Aang's children to inherit airbending. He is, by the time of Korra, the father of his own children, all of whom airbend, and he is more or less responsible, as a single man, for the survival of his father's culture into a new generation. What runs through him is that responsibility. He is the only living airbender in the world in his early adulthood, before the events of Korra begin to expand the population of airbenders by other mechanisms. He has had to be, for his father's sake, the carrier of an entire tradition. This duty was, for Tenzin, a private trap. He could not be a son, he could not be a brother in the ordinary way to siblings who could not airbend. He could not be an ordinary father. He was, instead, the heir of a culture his father had been the last living member of. The burden Aang escaped by being the protagonist of the show was simply passed forward to a child who never got to be a protagonist, and who had to live the rest of his life as the unwilling caretaker of an entire vanished people. Kaya and Bumi II, Aang and Katara's other 2 children, only exist in Korra canon and deserve the same flag. Kaya is the eldest. She is a waterbender. Bumi II, named after the king of Omashu, is a non-bender for most of his life until late in Korra. They appear in Korra as middle-aged adults who have, by their own descriptions, found their father difficult to live with. What hangs over them is the experience of being the Avatar's own family. Aang spent his life after the war working to rebuild the Air Nation, primarily through Tenzin, the child who could carry the tradition. Kaya and Bumi II, both adults in their own right, felt the cost of that focus in their own quiet ways. Being the child of the Avatar is structurally a position in which you are never going to be the most important child. Even after the war is won, the next world is being built around the child who can airbend. The show does not narrate this, Korra does briefly. The family Aang built was, in some quiet way, repeating a pattern Aang himself had been broken by. And 2 of his 3 children grew up in the shadow of a brother whose existence carried a duty too large for any of them to share. The expanded family of Avatar, the Last Airbender, the wider gallery of people the show only briefly looks at, all carry similar small wounds in miniature. The fortune teller's village, the fisherman of Zhanghui, the cabbage merchant who keeps reappearing in city after city, the Earth Kingdom soldiers who guard a wall, the Fire Nation schoolchildren whose teachers have lied to them about the war for their whole lives. The wound in all of these cases is the same one, scaled down. The 100-Year War touched every person you see on screen. It touched the people Aang and his friends only walked past. It touched the ones whose names the show never gave you. And almost every one of those people, in the show's careful framing, was carrying some smaller version of the same wound the central characters carry. Avatar. The Last Airbender, taken as a whole, is not, in the end, a story about heroes. It is a story about a world that has been at war for so long that nobody alive remembers a time before it, and about the small group of children who happen to be at the right ages to end it. The fact that they end it is the show's grace. The fact that ending it does not undo the years of the war is the show's honesty. Kaya, the mother of Sokka and Katara, never speaks a full line of dialogue in the present tense of the show. She exists only in flashback, and only briefly. She is the woman who walked out to meet the Fire Nation soldier in the raid on the Southern Water Tribe village. She told the soldier, when he came looking for the waterbender he had been told was hiding there, that the waterbender was her in order to spare her daughter. Katara, the actual waterbender of the village, was in the next room. The soldier killed Kaya in front of the small space her body was guarding. Katara found her after. The whole show, on a strict reading, descends from that single decision Kaya made in the next few seconds of her life. She is the theory of a mother who, in her last conscious thought, did the math very quickly and decided that her daughter's life was worth the lie. The further reading is that the lie was not, in any strict sense, necessary. The soldier, by the show's careful framing in the Southern Raiders, had been given orders to find and remove the last waterbender of the Southern tribe. He would have taken the daughter if she had been identified. He would have killed the daughter if he had been told to. Kaya gave him a closed answer in order to make the question impossible to follow. She bought her daughter a few more decades. She did this without knowing at the time that her daughter would grow up to be the most powerful waterbender of her generation, that her daughter would end the war, that her daughter would face the same soldier years later on a stormy night and choose not to kill him. She did it because she was a mother, and the daughter was hers. The show begins structurally in her sacrifice, and almost every act of love in the rest of the series is a small echo of the act she could not survive. She is on screen, in flashback, for a total of less than a minute across 3 books. She is, on a careful viewing, the single most important woman in Katara's life, including Katara herself. Lu Ten, Iroh's son, never appears in the show in the present tense either. He is, like Kaya, a figure entirely in flashback and in photograph. He is, by Iroh's account, the kind of young soldier who believed in the campaign his father was leading. He went with Iroh to Ba Sing Se. He fought as the heir of the second prince of the Fire Nation alongside the troops who were trying to breach the wall. He died in the long siege, inside or just inside the outer wall, in a manner the show does not narrate in detail. Iroh received the news, broke, and ended the siege within days. The Fire Nation lost Ba Sing Se for the next several years because of Lu Ten's death. The throne, by way of Azulon's order and Ursa's intervention, passed to Ozai instead of Iroh, because Iroh's only heir had died at the wall. Structurally, he is the pivot of the entire later plot. His death ends Iroh's military career, which empties the heir position of the Fire Nation, which gives Ozai his opening, which leads to Zuko's banishment, which puts Zuko on the ship that finds the Avatar, which gives the protagonist the antagonist who eventually becomes their ally and ends the war. The show could not have happened without his death, and the show is careful to give him almost no characterization. He is, on screen, a young man laughing in a photograph. He is, in another shot, a young man saluting his father at a parade. The show treats him with the dignity of a person whose face is not the show's to give you, and lets you understand, by Iroh's silent visit to his memorial in Tales of Ba Sing Se, that he had been a son worth losing the throne for. What hangs over him is the same thing that hangs over every soldier who died in the war. He had a name, he had a face, he had a life. He died doing what his father, the general, had asked him to do. The show makes Iroh into the man you love by way of what Iroh did with his son's death. There were thousands of Lutens on both sides of the wall, and none of the other fathers became Iroh. Most became other things. If you sit with the show for long enough, what you notice is that these threads cluster around the same recurring shapes. There is the shape of inherited cruelty, where the fathers pass to the sons the same wounds they themselves received. There is the shape of the long absence, where the parents leave for the war and the children grow up in the gap. There is the shape of the technique born of trauma, where the new ability someone invents in a moment of suffering becomes the wound they carry for the rest of their lives. There is the shape of the institution that outlives its founder, where the order set up for a good purpose ends, after enough decades, doing exactly the harm its founder feared. And there is the shape of the price of waiting, where the wisest people in the world watched the war from a careful distance for too long, until a 12-year-old boy had to do the work nobody else would. The show holds all of these together in one of the most patient pieces of writing television has ever produced for children. It does not lecture you about any of them. It plants them in the corners of episodes, in flashbacks, in the way an old man pours tea, in the way a young girl holds a necklace, in the way an admiral disappears into a wave. And then it leaves them there, in those corners, for whichever rewatch you happen to come back for. The darkness around each character is not the secret meaning the show was hiding. It is the part of the story the show was telling, very gently, just below the surface, the whole time. This is, in the end, what makes Avatar. The Last Airbender hold up the way it does. The show was, when it aired, written for children. It told a story they could follow, with bright colors, big characters, set-piece battles, comic relief, and a clean ending. And inside that story, it placed, with great care, the dark layers we have been walking through tonight. The children watched the surface. The adults, the children later became, on a rewatch can read the layers underneath. Almost every children's show that tries to do this fails. Almost none manage to lay down material that grows with the viewer the way Avatar does. The dark layers are not, on a careful reading, things the writers did not anticipate. They are things the writers planted, knowing that some of the viewers would still be sitting with the show in their 20s and 30s and 40s, looking for the seams. The show, taken as a whole, is now decades old. It first aired in 2005. The third book closed in 2008. The story has been finished in the canon you grew up on for longer than some of the people watching this video have been alive. And these readings keep arriving in essays and threads and patient late-night videos because the show was built with the patience to support them. You can come back to Aang at any age and you will find new things to read in his quietness. You can come back to Iroh at any age and find new things to read in his silence. You can come back to Azula and find the same anguish you found in your 20s is now arranged into something a little more familiar, a little less alien, a little more like a person you might have known. That is, finally, the gentle thing this show offers the viewer who comes back to it. It does not pretend that the world it depicts is simple. It does not pretend that any of the people in it are simple. It treats children as people. It treats villains as people. It treats spirits and animals and minor side characters as people. And it builds across 3 books the kind of moral architecture that almost no work of art for children has ever attempted with this much care. The darkness running through it is the way the show survives the years. It is the work the writers did with their hands free, because they trusted that eventually the viewers would come looking. And the viewers come looking now in their 30s and 40s on long nights in the dark, in the way you are watching this video. If you have made it this far, I'm glad to have shared the long walk with you. The show is, by every measure that matters, one of the great pieces of long-form storytelling of the last few decades, and the fact that it can be read on a careful evening as a series of carefully placed dark threads is part of why it endures. If you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe and I'll see you in the next one.